The Fearless Podcast, in a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Fearless Podcast. This is episode 71. And just to remind everybody, we are fully demonetized on YouTube, and this is a value for value proposition. So if you love our content, please go on over to thetexasboys.com. I want to remind you of our Northeast Homestead meetup this Saturday from 10 to 12 at Bob Wells Nursery at Sorella's Farm, Mineola, Texas. It's going to be a potluck. We've gotten a lot of newcomers that are coming out this week. So want to encourage y'all, for community building's sake and to meet one another, that y'all plan on coming out this Saturday from 10 to 12. And with that being said, I want to welcome today's guest to the Fearless Podcast. If my mouse will cooperate. John Moody, welcome to the Fearless Podcast. How you doing today, sir?
Good. How are you doing?
I am doing great. So I got this really awesome email this week. This guy, John Moody, I'm going to let him introduce himself, but unbeknownst to him, we were Facebook friends way back in the day when I was on Mike Zuckerberg's Fed book. And so I gleaned an enormous amount of information, and I always appreciated the content he put out and the comments he would make. And then I just recently found him on Twitter. So this is really cool. And it's really awesome what these guys are doing. We have an enormous amount in common. We're similar. What I wanted to talk about, John, maybe to start out, is maybe your origin story, your background, what led you to this lifestyle. Maybe you could kind of start from the middle of the beginning.
Yeah. I didn't realize we were 1984 book friends. That's what I refer to Facebook as. You know?
No, yeah.
So it's sad because there's so many cool people I met there over the years, and then the great purge, of Rona and all that nonsense. And so many good guys and their families were just like, enough of this, goodbye. And then and then a bunch of the conferences that I used to do broke apart as well. Like Mother Earth News went woke and ruined their brand and ruined their event. And I'm like, there's all these great families I used to get to see. Yeah. So, man, where's the best place to start? So I grew up Northeast Ohio, pretty typical blue collar family. My dad and his brothers ran a pipeline construction company back in the late 1970s, early 1980s, during that boom in Ohio and other states of laying, natural gas and other pipeline. So my childhood was pretty cool. I learned to drive stick shift left-handed.
Wow.
Because my dad would throw me or my brother in the truck with him, and he'd be driving the truck, and he'd have a huge topo map trying to figure out, where he has to be to put this pipe and stuff, where he needs to drop the equipment. So he'd make me or my brother shift. So you're sitting shotgun, you got to shift. So when he finally tried to teach me to drive stick shift as the driver, I had the worst time ever because it was backwards to me. I'm like, wrong hand and wrong direction for everything. So I grew up in a pretty typical blue collar family, moved to Kentucky in 2000 to go to seminary, was sent by my local churches. And while I was in seminary, I almost died from my diet. So people probably look at me, they're like, you're not a very big guy. This is the most I've ever weighed at 175 pounds. In seminary, I was so sick, I got down to about 100 pounds. So almost half the weight I am right now. And I was able to heal that with food. I went to a doctor. Doctor's like, oh, hey, man, we'll put you on pills. If the pills don't work, we'll just start cutting out the parts of your body that don't work anymore. I'm like, what on earth are you talking about? I'm like 24, 25 years old at the time. And all you can do for me is offer me a lifetime of medication or a lifetime of basically being permanently disabled because you're just going to start ripping apart my body. And so we're really fortunate, came across the work of Sally Fallon of the Weston A. Price Foundation. And we went down like this huge rabbit hole long before it was cool to go down this rabbit hole. Basically, like big pharma exists to keep you sick as long as possible, just alive enough to extract as much money out of you as they can. Big food is in cahoots with big pharma because it's the food that makes you sick and pharma that keeps you sick. Because it's not like they're going to tell you to do anything about your diet. And so I healed myself in under a year solely through dietary and lifestyle changes. So my doctor was like, when I told him this was the course of treatment I was going to do, he's like, that's fine. He goes, but it's impossible. It'll never work. It's not going to happen. Food cannot heal the human body. Lifestyle changes only can go so far. And when I went back a year later, he just couldn't believe that literally, like, the body is made to heal itself to a large degree. And so so at that point, we had gone from shopping at Walmart and Kroger to shopping at Wild Oats and Whole Paycheck. And I was like, some of this food is ridiculously expensive. And a lot, I'm like organic Cheerios. Like, is this actually better for me than Cheerios? Organic Fruit Loops, organic. So I was like, man, there's a lot of organic junk food in this place. And so we started getting raw milk from a local farmer. We joined a CSA. I eventually started a local food buying club as a way to simplify people getting real food from local and regional farmers. Because we were to the point where it's like, we're going to one farmer's market on Tuesday and another, and we have to go to our CSA pickup on Thursday. And then Friday morning at 6 a.m., I need to be in a dark alleyway for my raw milk drop, because we might get swatted picking up raw milk back in 2006. And then we have to go to another farm. I'm just like, I can't do this. Like, who has time to go 6 different places just to get basic groceries? So we started this buying club in 2006, grew like gangbusters over the next 5 years, until in 2011, we were raided by the Kentucky State Health Department at the behest of the FDA and USDA. That was very exciting times. Wow. Well, and your listeners may not be familiar with this, but basically from the late 1990s up through about 2014, the federal government waged a proxy war on raw milk and local food through state level agencies. There's a cheesy title, great movie by Kristen Canty called Farmageddon. If you've never seen the movie Farmageddon, she highlights 7 or 8 out of 300 or 400 total stories. Here in Kentucky, we had a farmer who was delivering raw milk, and he was literally SWAT raided on a raw milk delivery run. Can you even fathom like a farmer delivering milk, and he gets a much greater response than any BLM protest that burned down parts of cities from law enforcement and stuff? So we were raided in 2011, right at the peak of all of this nonsense. And we were the first group in the nation to be raided and walk away winners. Because they served us cease and desist, quarantine orders. You break this quarantine, it's $5,000 fine, minimum 90 days in jail, all that fun stuff. And so we were able to basically beat them at their own game. And through that, I went even further down the rabbit hole of realizing, like more conservative libertarian people live under the illusion that if we're just good people and we just kind of keep our heads down, they'll leave us alone.
This is such a pressing point, and here's why. You know, my boys started this YouTube channel, what, 8 or 9 years ago as a hobby, and then as my oldest son got more involved and more skilled, he said maybe 3 or 4 years ago, "Hey, Dad, I think I want to do this as a business." Right? So we started approaching it that way. We always knew that InQtel and YouTube was incredibly problematic. And so we planned accordingly. And rather than depend on ad revenue and whatnot, we started our own website. We contracted with other local providers for different products we could offer. And so that's how we kind of monetize ourselves. And then the channel exploded. Then we got a bunch of strikes and we almost got vaporized. And what's fascinating as we travel through this, then what happened with my boys is when the channel had a ton of success, they parlayed all of that profit into their own IRL business, and they now have a construction company, and that's what they're doing daily. But what you're saying, I want to, it's so relevant. I just got these 2 comments from Holler Girl, and I figured we could integrate this because this is why we do what we do, and it emphasizes that. This Holler Girl says, "Do your family a favor and stick to your best assets. You are a good-looking, smart, healthy family living what is the dream life on a Texas ranch. Save your politics and religion for X and Rumble and just make quality ranching and family life videos for YouTube. No preaching or politics. You're showing off what is a beautiful life looks like for a family of ranchers. Not all your audience is religious or political. That is why people have turned away from your channel. Anyway, I hope you make a comeback. You have so much going for you, and people could use a little upbuilding, happy content in dark times." Now, why this, you know, that is a talking point. But what is lost in all of that is if you cease one, if you do not speak up, the freedom of speech is irrelevant. Like you can have the freedom to supposedly say and do whatever you want. And if you don't act on that, and if you don't practically apply that and live that out, it becomes more and more irrelevant as we are watching, as just like you were saying about the libertarian minded people. Well, if we're just good and we keep our head down and mind our own business, you know, this will all go away, for lack of a better term. And that is absolutely false. And because we do love our agrarian, slower paced, intentional lifestyle, and because we do demonstrate and illustrate that, that is what provokes me to say something. And what does affect us is our fundamental, foundational, religious ethos and, you know, foundation that we build our life on, which is what has created, by the grace of God and by his blessing, it has created this lifestyle. And then, you know, practicing his principles, you know, that's how we have been able to flourish. And then when you're watching all of this systemically under attack, and you're watching other families like the Keene family we just had on with, you know, they're trying to radiate us and they're raiding raw dairy farms and all these different things. And to just like create some kind of like Instagram fake, like, oh, look at us. And, you know, like it's if you're not willing to say something, it's a LARP. You're LARPing for the sake of generating revenue. And what's more hilarious is we've been completely demonetized, so it's kind of irrelevant from that standpoint. And if you don't say something, right, and you have this beautiful lifestyle that you're trying to demonstrate, and it all just erodes into nothing, and you say nothing, and the next thing you know, your lifestyle is completely eradicated by unelected bureaucrats.
Yeah. Well, and if you listen to that person's logic, the answer to bad times is to stick your head in the sand of a fiction. You know, things are bad, so let's pretend they're not bad by creating content that's dishonest to the viewer about what's going on. And then people wonder why you have bad times. It's because people don't want to deal with reality.
That's right.
You know? And the reality is, it's like America, sadly, is a nation in decline. We're 135 trillion in total debt because we're sending, how much have we sent to Ukraine and other countries alone in the past 5 years? And you don't, none of this gets fixed by pretending, we live in Care Bears.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's fascinating to me because I've had other interviews and I've had other content creators on, and a couple of them are like, "Hey, look, I'll come on and you can interview me, but I don't want to promote the interview because this is my bread and butter, and I make evergreen content, And I think it's great the way you talk and the stuff you say, and I completely agree with you, but I don't want to affect my paycheck. But what's lost on that is you're presuming that In-Q-Tel and they, them, and those, like when they're done with you, like they're not just going to throw you up and toss you out the window. And so you're curating and you're curtailing your speech, and you're doing all these things to placate this AI god or whatever, however you want to look at it. You're doing all these things, and you're stifling yourself, and for for an algorithm could kick you off, your channel could get hijacked. Another friend of mine, his channel, he had a really big channel and it just got hijacked. He did get it back, but I mean, this virtual stuff and this social media stuff is so ephemeral.
Yeah.
And that's why I love what you do. It's real life, and we'll get into in soon we'll get into the Rogue Food Conference, because this is what I'm really excited about. And we'll talk about that. But what's just as important as talking about the issues are bringing solutions to the table and creating networks and places for people to meet and work together to create the parallel solutions that are required to either bypass, sidestep the bureaucracy, or to push back, whether it's legal or however the process needs to happen, providing avenues and venues for that so that we can continue to drink raw milk and we can continue to grass feed our cows, without RFID tracking, so that we can be taxed on their farts and all these other harmful things that they're doing to the environment while we eat the bugs and do all the other things that we're supposed to do. This stuff is so critical and it's so crucial. And there are other extremes where content creators want to be like, the sky fell again today and it's falling again tomorrow, and then it's going to fall again, and we don't have any solutions. But as long as you're aware of the problem, just stay aware of the problem every single day, and we'll get hundreds of thousands of views.
Yeah. Oh, I gave a talk at a conference called County Before Country. And one of the biggest things I hate about conservatism is it's Doom Inc.
Yeah.
We're always there to tell you, oh, this is the newest terrible thing that the government and the liberals, and if we're honest, we're doing to you as well, because it's not like 80% of Republican elected officials are any different from their Democratic peers, other than the color they put on their campaign signs.
Yeah.
But they're this is very similar to Big Pharma. Big Pharma doesn't want to cure people because it hurts profits. Big conservatism doesn't actually want to solve some of the problems they say they're fighting, because it would put them out of a job and out of a lot of donations and stuff, especially the talking heads on the conservative side. You rarely see these people both engaging in actual solutions. You know, you don't see them expending their platforms on actually getting something done. And you rarely even hear them talk about actual solutions. You know, so when Joel and I got together, that was our whole goal, is just like what are solutions? What can we actually do given where we find ourselves?
Yeah, great illustration. Current illustration of a Twitter firestorm is Matt Walsh, like just banging on raw milk and
Oh yeah.
like completely misrepresenting it to a fault that that guy's way too smart to say something that dumb, you know, and then, like double down on it. And it just speaks to the fact, and it's interesting that people have dredged up screenshots of his Pfizer promotion. I know him and Ben Shapiro were really big on the modified whatchamacallits, and they were all about it until, you know, their base like said, hey, you know, this really isn't a good thing. And then all of a sudden they're all about like freedom of choice and all that stuff. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a money construct. And I keep looking for these fiscal conservatives, because I remember as the Republican Party transmutated during the Clinton era, right? And there became all these Arnold Schwarzenegger fiscal conservatives. And I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for one of y'all to actually be fiscally okay. We know that you're morally degenerate, right? Anything goes. And for some reason that works. But why don't you at least be fiscally conservative? Because you keep talking about being fiscally conservative, but nobody wants to cut anything. Nobody wants to stop spending. You know, they just want to reappropriate the crazy spending of the Democrats to more conservative ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the military industrial complex, who's
Yeah.
really hurting for cash. Yeah, no, it's just crazy. Because you know, you have Doom Inc. in the conservative world, and then you have corporate crony conservatism, which is the Daily Wire has always been a wonderful example of this. Is like, we're conservative. Well, what are you conserving? Well, we're conserving big business.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, which is what has like eroded. You know, big business is who will pay for women to travel to other states to have abortions if your truly conservative state won't let them murder their own children. Yeah, I'm just like, I'm like, you guys are killing me. Like, what planet do you live on where, you know, big corporations are just as much, and at this point even more a threat, again, as you pointed out with 1984 book, they're an even greater threat in some ways to your security, to your family's well-being, to your family's multi-generational financial success, as the government is, because they're all one happy incestuous family on Epstein Island together.
Exactly right. Yeah. But don't worry, the client list is going to be released, and the JFK documents are going to be released. And this last, if we all just vote this one last time, we will dissolve this existential threat to America's freedoms, and it'll be great again. And yeah, it doesn't work like that. And what is beautiful is that you and Joel put together this rogue food conference, and I think this one is going to be in Dallas, and it's November 8th and 9th.
Yep.
And you chose my birthday, which I really appreciate that. I want to thank you that you chose to celebrate it on my birthday. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. But this is what's beautiful about these conferences is they are providing one, a chance to network, to meet people, to meet other people doing what you're doing, or meet other people that are doing what you hope to do. And then you learn the tricks of the trade and how to network, and a lot of this status jujitsu that it is required to maneuver around or through the bureaucracy. And so it's real life stuff. You're not waiting another 4 years like, oh, but what if you know, what if the wrong person gets in this time? now that they fixed how voting works, and that's all better now. And and it's still not a machine, and it doesn't just automatically tabulate what's programmed in there, regardless of whoever shows their ID and pushes a button. And but you can go to a conference and you can learn real world practical things. And yeah, they're going to talk about politics, and yeah, they're probably going to talk about religion and all these things that have greatly formed and shaped and have given us the reason we have free speech. Yeah, don't talk about religion, but well, how did we get free speech? It's so hilarious. My buddy Billy Bonds, he calls it the United States of amnesia. People have, if it didn't happen in 24 months, people have no clue of what actually happened. Real history is being rewritten.
Oh, dude, like we had an assassination attempt on a former president who's running for office
In
and
America recently.
and I mean, most people, it's it's as if it never really happened. Like 30 years ago, it would have been the major news story for a month. It would have dominated headlines, and within 36 hours, it's memory hold, and you got news outlets already running fake headlines about it. It's totally wild.
Yeah.
I just,
and even the guy that was shot, like, practically forgot about it too. So it's very interesting because it's wild stuff. It's a wild world we live in right now.
and that's where, though, it's just like, to some extent, the only good thing about the media cycle is if you realize it's basically a dopamine circus meant to keep you distracted. Once you walk away from it, there's two directions you can walk away. You can walk away into despair, or you can walk away into getting stuff done.
Exactly.
And that's Joel and I's heart. One of the reasons we became friends years ago, we became friends because we were trying to get arrested back in the early 2010s. We were doing fun things like smuggling raw milk from Pennsylvania to the footsteps of the FDA in Silver Springs, Maryland, and doing raw milk and cookies on the footstep of the FDA. And we called them for months and months and let them know we were coming. Because we're just like, well, what can you do about these farm raids? What can you do about the government wanting to, the government in a lawsuit literally said there is no fundamental right to choose what you eat and what you feed your children. Like, what can you do about that? Are you just going to sit back until they do like what's going on in Norway and other countries where they put quotas on the number of animals that can be raised?
Yeah.
And so meat goes through the roof in price, and you start eating bug meat because it's cheaper than actual meat. Like, and Joel and I were just like, well, what do you do? Like, there's so much you can actually be doing, especially at, in your home, at your local county level, and at your state level. And so Joel and I were just like, let's just go all in on this. Let's show people what a difference they can make in just 5, 10, 20 years by doubling down right where they are and focusing on things that are actually in their power and ability.
And that's what Bill Mollison was talking about when he said permaculture is sedition. It was about focusing on the things you could do every day, right? And this is exactly why 10 years ago we relocated down here. Land was cheaper, the culture was better, life was slower, and we completely redesigned our life to live a more intentional, slower, agrarian lifestyle. And we just try, fail, adjust. And we knew, and what was the most amazing thing to me was, everybody knows chickens are the gateway animal to homesteading. But, what we realized shortly after that is, as great as chickens were, cows, like, you put this cow in a pasture with a fence, And relatively speaking, you could check on it every couple of weeks, maybe if you had to. And as long as the grass is good and the water is right, um, it is virtually, it's almost like a miracle. It's almost like God created an animal to eat an unedible vegetarian stuff that is like unedible by human beings, and it can concentrate it into a nutrient dense food source. And these animals are so self-sufficient, and it's just like, wow, this is just the easiest way. Yeah. Now, and I realize that's very easily said. And there are complications and there is work and there are no panaceas. But I mean, to us, we were trying to do chicken tractors and all this stuff and organic feed. And we're doing all this. And I'm like, this chicken costs $28. And I'm like, if I wanted to sell it, I'd have to sell it for $50. And there's people, hey, look, there's people buying $50 chickens. And I'm like, but if I can sell a chicken for $50, there ain't no way I'm eating it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not eating a $50 chicken. So that's what really pushed us into cows. And shameless plug, we do have 2 steers that are for sale in October. So I just want to remind everybody. So make sure you're on the mailing list when they become available. We do have 2 steers that'll be available, but that's why we shifted to, and we just started trying to raise our own food and do all that stuff. And then once it started to progress and we met our neighbors and we started reaching out, and other people said, hey, I want to buy some, and when we first moved here and we moved into our house, there was a pasture on the other side of the street full of longhorns, and we became best friends, and that became our cow mentor. And for the first 5 or 6 or 7 years, we bought all of our beef from him. It was at an incredible price, delivered right to our door. And like, talk about empowering, talk about life-changing, and not even the quality. He didn't vaccinate or do any of that stuff. He was very organic and regenerative. But just the one, helping your neighbor and getting this very high quality product at an incredibly reasonable price. I mean, we were paying comparable to the grocery store at the time, or probably less, and getting a much higher quality product. We were reinvesting our dollars back into our community, supporting him, and it just becomes this synergistic. And that's what's so awesome about what y'all are doing. You're creating this synergy, and it all surrounds your food. Many of us learn the hard way. Our food is poisoning us. It's killing us, right? So we make this change and we adjust our diets and we start to grow our own food and all these different things. And then that facilitates, and then we had this global thing, that disrupted everything and destroyed the supply chains. And the silver lining I saw in all of it, I was like, this is going to make local, regenerative, smaller farms more fiscally, financially viable. It's resolving the supply chain issues. It's eliminating the supply chain issues. And it's cloistering the local community dollars, keeping them in the community, which I think the bean counter guys say that'll multiply like by a factor of 7 or so. And it's not offshoring your money to China.
Yeah.
And there's so much power in that. And that's what's funny about like these like Daily Wire. Oh, if you support conservatism, buy razors, right, that are made in China,
Yeah.
or Ben Shapiro's chocolate bar or whatever. No, go buy your neighbor's beef. How about that? Like, that's real. Like, those dollars, like, if you buy beef off of your neighbor, your money stays in your community.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know how well your listeners know some of this stuff. The USDA has what they call their food dollar tracker, where they track how much of each dollar consumers spend actually make it to the farmer. And they've been doing this, I think, at least for 40-ish years, maybe longer. But if you're at a store, you're at a restaurant, and, let's say you buy that $9 a pound chicken breast at a store, how much of that $9 do you actually think goes to the farmer?
50 cents.
It's less than 20 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
On average. So, there's some variance across product categories and whatever. But on every dollar you spend, the actual person who raised it is getting somewhere between 10, 17 cents. And then you begin to wonder, where did all this money go?
Mm-hmm.
And it went to your enemies. It went to the very people who are trying to replace you. And that's why, local community and local economics scare the powers that be so much, both governmental and corporate, because wealthy communities are able to stand up to both of them. Communities that have a measure of self-sufficiency for food production and for other things, you don't need the 84 different corporations that the average American has to buy things from every single month just to survive. And when you're doing local community stuff, the government isn't getting 143 cuts because of every layer of transactions. One thing I teach people is, have you ever thought about how much something you buy actually truly costs? Because if you buy a car that costs $20,000, most Americans had to earn between $25,000 and $33,000 to have $20,000 to spend.
And then they spend the 20,000 and then pay sales tax on that.
Yeah. Well, and the person who sold it to you pays taxes. So yeah. I discovered this years ago with my business finance background, that on every large transaction, the government always makes the greatest profit.
Yeah.
Because they get all of the income taxes and other things for both parties. Because you had to pay income taxes to earn the money, and the person who sold you something is going to pay income taxes on what they sold you. They get the sales taxes. They get all the sales taxes. And I'm just like, this is the greatest scam you could possibly imagine, that on a $20,000 purchase, the government probably made $15,000 in profit.
Wow. Yeah, and not only did they make 15,000 in profit, they exponentially destroy our buying power.
Yep.
And then make up practically the rest with inflation. And the biggest thing that I've seen with all this ultra processed food and all this grocery store stuff, and that's even in the health food, the organic versions of everything, highly processed in a wrapper, is that the majority of this ultra processed food is exclusively to hide inflation, because, our cost of food has shifted from 80% of our cost of living being our food to like 20%. And it's all because of seed oils and these manufacturing facilities that are able to use corn syrup and all this other stuff to create these edible things, and then put a label on it and say that it's healthy or organic or whatever, or put it in a pyramid. Yeah, that's not weird.
Yeah. And so this is why Joel and I did Rogue Food, because we're just like, we could sit here and lay out all of these problems: government subsidies, fake food propping up, therefore fake food prices being so cheap, so people go along with it, even though it gives them cancer, diabetes, and heart disease out the wazoo. And I think something like 50% of Americans will be obese by 2030 or 2035. We can lay out, all you have to do is go anywhere in a public place and the problems stare you in the face. I was at our local gas station recently, and there's a dude pumping gas, and he was leaning against his truck and looking down, and his stomach had to sit almost 2.5 full feet in front of him. And I was like, how do you not look down and not be heartbroken for what you've allowed yourself to become?
Yeah.
And Joel and I were like, we know the problems, but what can we do about it? And so that's why we did Rogue. We're like, hey, what we need is to encourage and empower people to find ways to circumvent this system, to find ways to successfully not comply, to find ways to, especially at the state level, chip away, and chip away at these food regulatory structures and these farming regulatory structures to open up pocket, seas of sanity in this broader, just like muck mess we now have to live in. And that's what we do at every Rogue. We just highlight people who really have solutions that they've been living and doing for years and years and years.
So what can folks expect at this upcoming Rogue Food Conference? What are going to be some of the topics?
Yeah. So this one, because electronic animal ID is being rolled out in November, our special focus is going to be talking about not just how we plan to stop RFID of animals, radio frequency ID tagging, electric ID tagging, but how do we consistently not just stop, but knock back so many of these governmental programs like beef checkoff? A bunch of us behind the scenes right now are in a discussion. How do you kill the beef and pork checkoff programs, which are just heinous programs, federally mandated that you have to pay money to a private company in order to engage in your business. Total nonsense.
So that they can lobby against you to destroy your industry. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's nuts. So, Congressman Harriet Hageman, who's helped successfully stop RFID a number of times, her office confirmed with me this week that she's going to come down and speak about her efforts to kill RFID. I'm going to give a presentation on, a specific plan for stopping RFID, but it's a plan that could work for almost any type of legislation like this. And the biggest thing Joel and I always try and get people to realize is non-compliance, wide-scale non-compliance is always the most successful thing anyone could do to save their community, save their country, save their family. And the worst part is Rona was the greatest example of this. Yep. And one of the greatest dropped balls in conservative history. Like in my state of Kentucky, we only had 2 businesses in the entire state that openly, defiantly didn't comply with our governor. We had a majority Republican House, a majority Republican Senate. Every single other office in the Kentucky legislature was occupied by a Republican. All we had was a Democratic governor. This was like the greatest slam dunk ever for conservatives in Kentucky. And the governor walked all over all of these people, maybe 1 or 2 people in the Senate, couple people in the House tried to stand up to the governor's nonsense. And so these 2 small business owners were the only people in the whole state who didn't just defy the governor, but they were such a thorn in his flesh. My understanding is he had to form an entire task force just to deal with these 2 businesses because they were causing so much trouble for him in the courts and in the court of public opinion. Because they were making people start to say to themselves, maybe I don't have to comply. Maybe wearing a face diaper all the time isn't actually necessary. Maybe they can't compel me to do this. And that's a big part of Joel and I's heart at Rogue is, like in a state like Texas, where I believe raw milk is relatively restricted. Sure, you can try and sue over raw milk being restricted in Texas. Sure, you can lobby the Texas legislator till you turn blue in the face. But if 20,000 people, 30,000 people in Texas all publicly said to the government, we are going to drink raw milk and buy it from local farmers, whether you like it or not. The Texas legislator would not be able to do anything about it. If in the state of Kentucky, even just 500 businesses, 1,000 businesses had said to the governor, that's great. We're not enforcing masks. We're not enforcing social distancing. Sorry, you don't have this power over us. You do not have this level of power over people. The governor would have had nothing. He would have been, the emperor's new clothes, just standing there naked. Their ability to do these things is completely predicated on the population's servile attitude towards their stupid edicts. And so Joel and I were just like, at the end of the day, we have a lot of examples, including mine when the Kentucky Health Department raided us, where if good people will together just stand up, just say no, you really can more easily win than you ever imagined.
Yeah. And that's so great. And, the other thing about the example of Rona is within that example and within all of the tabletop exercises and all of the writings, the goofiest and kind of scariest part about all of this technocratic, bureaucratic overreach is they write extensive papers on all this stuff and they tabletop exercise it, right? And so they tell you what they're going to do. So we do know that this pandemic, there will be another one, and they are going to react in a very similar way. And it's probably going to be more tyrannical, more authoritarian. And we all just experience, and we were able to experience it. And there was all of this scientism that explained that, the droplets and 6 feet magically makes, viruses disappear, and droplets, transmit like atomic size virus particles and all these different things, right? And then they're like, oh, no, they don't. No, it doesn't. Never mind. Yeah, no, I don't know why we said that, and they literally just gaslighted like billions of people. I mean, the entire world did it. And they're going to do it again. So it's better rather than to turn on a curated YouTube channel of the people that have a farm and they're all pets and they spend $150,000 a year in pet food to have this huge gigantic petting zoo and this beautiful flower garden and all this stuff. It's like, how about we work together? How about we network? How about we talk about solutions? How about we talk about real food and how to process it? How do you get your food? How do you process it if it's a cow or whatever? Or, the amazing thing about raw milk here in Texas is we have 2 raw dairy farms very close to us. So it's very accessible for us. But then if you go not too far north of here, and this is so incredible, the local power co-op bought up this huge dairy farm, right? And this is an older couple. They had this beautiful, huge dairy farm. And so the electrical co-op comes in, buys it up, pays them off, and now it's a solar farm. And so they're farming electricity, renewable energy. It's so
Dude, it's so I live in rural Kentucky. Me and my sons train judo and jujitsu at a town directly north of us. It's like 12 miles. And they're putting in easily 1,000 some acres of solar panels. And I'm sitting here, I've seen how much earth they've moved and how much concrete they've put down. And I'm just like, these solar panels are never going to produce as much energy as it took them. And then, this is 1,000 acres. I can't feel too bad about it because a lot of it is industrial row cropping land. It should be,
right.
It should be prime pasture land. It should be getting cowed. But I'm just like, this is going to be ecological disaster, like the wind turbines, that The wind turbines take a ludicrous amount of energy to make. Most of them never end up net energy positive. And then there's no way to dispose of all the waste from the wind turbines.
Yeah, they bury it. Yeah, it's crazy.
So
It's just, and it's just
we're
it's
told this
more,
is green. This is sustainability.
yeah, yeah. And and that's the and and then you have the alternative solutions, like we can't participate in uh creating photovoltaic cells. China has to do that. Lucky for
Yeah.
them. And and we can't build these fiberglass wind turbines and all this stuff, right? But what we can do is you can have a cow.
Yeah.
You can have maybe a small herd. You can have a flock of chickens. You can do these things, and you can participate in your own food production. And then if you become good at it, you can have enough to maybe sell some or give some to your neighbor. I mean, and this is, I mean, these are the fundamental building blocks of society. I mean, this is the way towns were formed, and then once we mechanized everything and made it a concrete jungle, and then brought in the infrastructure and the trash removal and all these, I mean, the most fascinating thing to me, um, that it we'll see. And I mean, well, we're kind of seeing it right now with these Venezuelan gangs hijacking high rises and all this stuff. And this was all predicted, but like people have become so synthetic and detached from reality. One, they're living there. And I realize not everybody chooses to live there. And I realize circumstances and different things happen, but there are a lot of people that choose to live in these environments that can absolutely afford not to.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they are so allured by this completely artificial and synthetic lifestyle, and the hustle and the bustle and the electricity and the nightlife and all of these different things that don't add any value to your life. If anything, it's the exact opposite. Men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. And most of the stuff that goes on in the dark is absolutely evil. And along with that is the corruption and everything else. And, that's why almost exclusively, like every city, even the conservative ones, are a liberal dumpster fire. They're completely unsustainable, and nobody's talking about that, as the supply chain continues to be self-destructed by design, like when these densely populated areas put pressure on stuff and the supply chain disappears, like it is like apocalyptic type projections. Just it's mathematic. Like you can't, like, where's this stuff going to come from?
Yeah.
It's
Interestingly, Wendell Berry, I think 20 or 30 years ago, he once said that no city should be allowed to be bigger, that the 100 miles around the city cannot fully sustain food and otherwise. So
yeah. And how brilliant is that? Because exactly, like if it, when you read about cities, in history or in the Old Testament, or whatever, these cities, they certainly weren't concrete jungles with like 200-story high rises and all of this, force pumping. You got to pump water, you got to pump electricity, you got to do all these artificial things that all have to be maintained. And when I, I'm fascinated by the opulence, and not just in America, but there's a lot of these when you look at the UK or these retirement communities like Marbella and these different coastal areas, and it really makes you wonder, like, as things restrict and tighten, and as these luxuries in life, they are going to disappear to an extent. And in a real way, if you're living a slower and agrarian life, like, oh, I can't get a starter anymore for my Lexus sports coupe. Oh, I don't drive I don't really have to worry about that because
yeah.
I have a Lexus sports coupe. We live in a very exciting time. It's very interesting, there's an enormous amount of opportunity. And, you know, it's great to be alive. And if you're living in this like paranoid paradigm, there's so many people you talk to, like, I would never have children. I
Oh,
wouldn't bring them into this mess, you know?
I
And
got
you're just like,
6. I wish I could have more.
yeah. Yeah, us too. We have 6, and, you know, it appears that we're tapped out for now. So, but I mean, just to think about that, you are so either self-absorbed or so paranoid that you have no care to even replace yourself,
Yeah.
or let alone uh, live a living legacy with your children and be part of that process as they grow and mature and create, and you can participate in all that, and just the satisfaction and the fulfillment. It's incredible. You know, we're in this stage where my oldest son is starting to build his house, and it's very surreal. You know, it's
Yeah.
very surreal. And it like, and it's so great. You get up and you go to work, and, you know, and talk about like motivation. And you're just like, you know, you put in, you know, we homeschooled our kids, and we put in all that time, and we invested in them, and then we invested in them financially, and then we allowed them to follow their passions and what they were interested in. And now to watch that kind of flesh out and come to fruition, it's very surreal. But the satisfaction in that, like, there's no type of like investment or
Mhm.
sports trophy or praise of man or any like awards conference, or there's no monetary bank account number. There's no way you can put a number on any of that. And it's just and then for people that have never experienced that, it's hard to imagine that, you know, it's hard for them to even imagine what that's like. And it's so incredibly satisfying and fulfilling. And what do you know? I mean, that's what we were created and designed to do. And then as that works itself out in time, it's also designed to be so incredibly rewarding, you know. And yeah, it's, you know, and it's bizarre to listen to people that are so disconnected. They're just like, oh, I would just never have children, you know.
Um,
It's like, wow.
well, you would like, there's a author and pastor by the name of C.R. Wiley. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He has a great book called The Household and the War for the Cosmos. But he has a short quip he gives. He goes, those who have hope in the future send themselves into it, referring to children.
Uh-huh.
You know, like, few things are a sign of your hopefulness and trust in God, like your willingness to create a new you. And because in a real sense, you know, we're time travelers, all of us.
Yeah.
We're sent to the future by our parents,
Mhm.
you know, because they won't get to be there. And in America, it's just a challenge right now because the past few generations did not live for the future. They weren't the wise men who left an inheritance to their children's children. You know, some of that was theological issues in America the past 6, 7, 8 decades, of people, instead of people having a future oriented theology, they had an escapist theology.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very true.
And so Wiley's great. You know, you're bringing up what's going on in Colorado. It reminds me of this crazy story out of England, where somewhere in England, there's like a community that was overran by feral chickens. You know, some people had backyard chickens. They decided they didn't want to keep them. They kind of, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, an NPR of all places ran this hilarious article about this community that is terrorized by feral chickens. And they're having all these community meetings to figure out what to do about feral chickens. I'm like, you know, I'm like, you are a nation that once conquered half of the globe, and you all are unable to deal with chickens. Chickens throw your lives. I'm like, man, I'm like, I understand you all can't have guns in England. I'm like, 2 katanas and run up and down the street, a few swings. It's like chicken tacos, chicken pot pot. I'm like, how could you all struggle with issues like this? Where have you gotten to? That these are your problems, that you need the government. You have to have meetings and councils and committees to figure out what to do about a few mean chickens. So it's just hilariously wild. And this is the great thing. Like, this is what gives guys like us and our children and our grandchildren such an opportunity. I always tell my boys, I'm just like, my great-great-grandfather's generation and the generation before him, the World War I, World War II generations, it's like these dudes learned Latin in middle school.
Yeah.
Every one of these guys was fit, healthy. We just watched the movie The Boys in the Boat about the rowing team from America that won the Olympics. And like, every single guy at that college was the equivalent of like a modern high school athlete, like everybody was your competition. I tell my sons, I'm like, you've never had less competition to be successful right now. There's just so much opportunity for people who are willing to put in the work, who are willing to step up to be people of character, be people of conviction, be people who create good things. Because again, there's almost nobody left to compete with you.
Yeah, that's the promise of the future. I tell my boys the exact same things. If you show up on time, if you're dressed appropriately, you can't climb the ladder of success dressed in the costume of a clown. And regardless of whatever Microsoft and, Steve Jobs and Apple, they deconstructed the productive workforce, and, you can have a man bun and you can be inked out and have nose gauges and everything, because it's not what's on the outside, it's what's on the inside account. You're a free spirit, and but now you're disfigured and all this stuff. And and it's weird. You try to explain that and people are like, wow, you're so judgy. And like, where in the Bible does it say I can't get tattoos? I'm like, well, you shouldn't get one on your neck. You know what I mean? Like, I got to explain this to you. You know what I mean? And but yeah, like if you just show up, like you're 80% ahead of everybody, and then if you're polite and you're dressed properly, people will give you respect just because it doesn't look like you just crawled out of bed. And and then if you give them a quote in a timely fashion, gives them the opportunity to respond, and you are going to be so much. Y'all are young and 19, 16, and 15, and the boys are showing up to price these very large jobs. They priced several fence jobs, and the one guy, and it was a very large, like $30,000 or $40,000 job, and he's like, "Now, how old are you boys?" And you can work this equipment and all this stuff. And it was fascinating because he had them come out, and then eventually they got the job, and here's a bunch of young kids, you know what I mean? And they did it, and they made a ton of money, and people appreciated it. And now this is where the problem is the solution. It is very sad that most people want basic universal income, and they all, deserve all this stuff, and they're time blind, and, and they've earned all of these different privileges just from being born and all this stuff. But with that workforce and with this synthetic mindset, for those of us that are fundamentally sound and hold to traditional Christian values, for lack of a better term, and practically live out what we believe, there is so much opportunity, because it is in such direct opposition to the way everybody else is functioning or not functioning. It just creates more opportunity. And, that's what's really neat about the Rogue Food Conference. I will put the link down below. There is a discount code. The discount code is Texas 10, and we're looking forward to being there. But this is all about creating that mindset and the opportunity mindset, and then how to engage that mindset, how to put it into practice. And if you're already doing it, it's going to be tips and tricks to how to make it more efficient and effective, and how to deal with this growing bureaucracy. And I'm real interested in this RFID thing, because my bull that I just bought, I don't get this guy. So I bought the super sweet low-line Hereford. Is beautiful and he's great stock. But the guy that had this little herd, he was all of his cows have this RFID chip.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why in the world? That costs you money. And you're doing all this stuff and you're registering it and you're reporting and you're doing all this stuff that costs you money. And what are you getting out of this other than the fact that they're going to be able to track you to kingdom come? You know what I mean? Like, you are just willingly going. This isn't mandated. You're not required to do this, yet you're going along with this whole foolish idea with no intrinsic, like you're getting nothing out of it. It's just like, it's so fascinating to even think about.
Well, and I think Michigan might be one of the few states that did mandate at the state level RFID a number of years ago. And the result has been a 50% faster decline in small farms than any other state in the country.
Wow.
Because that's the biggest reason we need to stop programs like this. Because the goal is to squeeze guys like you and I and our families out of, beef in America is 80 to 85% consolidated. 4 companies control 80 to 85% of all beef consumed in America. The grocery store in America is what I call the illusion of choice. Because you walk into the grocery store and you see all of these different beef products from supposedly all of these different companies. And you can choose Arby's, and you can choose Hardee's, and you can choose Wendy's, and you can choose McDonald's. And people are like, I have all of this choice, the free market at work. And it's like the Wizard of Oz. It's all an illusion. And when you pull back the curtain, there's just 4 guys sitting there raking in all the money while the farmers become poorer and poorer, and the industry becomes even more controlled.
Yeah, and the government solution is, well, we'll just subsidize you to not do stuff. Like, oh, thanks. Yeah, which will drive up the price even more, which will make us unproductive, which will ruin the land. And and then we'll get bought out by a solar conglomerate, and then the land won't even be used for what it was designed for. And it's this endless circle. And it's why we have to talk about it. It's why we have to provide solutions. It's why, like, if we want to keep doing this for the sake of our children, if we like the fact that our children get to eat food and we want them to continue to get to eat food, this is why we have to be proactive. We have to be aware of what's going on. We have to talk about it. We have to find solutions. And then we have to actively participate in those solutions, so that our freedoms, our freedom of speech and our freedom of movement and our freedom and ability to grow our own food, so that doesn't go away or get replaced with some bureaucratic mechanism that involves like stainless steel vats and, cricket and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
man. Totally agree. So again, it'll be great to meet you all in person. We're really, again, this is our first time bringing rogue food to that part of the country. We've done it at Joel's Farm in Polyface. We did one in Florida. We've done Tennessee, and we did Washington State last fall. And for years and years and years, people have just been like, when are you coming to Texas? I'm like, well, now's our chance to really stir the pot in the South.
I'm really looking forward to it. And, thanks for coming on my birthday. I really appreciate that. And
it'll be a good birthday meal. So
yeah, we're going to be there. So if any of y'all are looking for a meetup, check us out. It's going to be November 8th and 9th. The link's going to be down below. There's going to be a discount code. And I really appreciate what John and Joel have put together, and there's going to be a lot of great speakers. It's going to be a really fun time. We're looking forward to it. John, thank you for your time. Thank you for being on. And remember, y'all, stay fearless, my friends.